Today we have an interesting program on the flood control project in Winnetka. This is a massive project. It runs all the way from Winnetka Avenue to almost Tower Road, I think, and roughly Hibbard to almost the Edens Expressway. My understanding is so much dirt has been removed and placed on the Winnetka golf courses, the par 3 course and the 18-hole course, that the elevation of the course, average elevation of the course, has been raised close to 14 inches. So it's a massive project. So with that, I'd like to introduce James Burnell, Director of Engineering of Winnetka Public Works, and Mike Watson, the Floodplain Project Manager.
Can you all hear me? Good morning. I thought I was going to give the golf update, but it didn't go that way. And I hear we have some Winnetka residents here as well. Just so you know, your director's working. So I'm still here working today. So good morning, everybody. My mom is actually the past president of the senior group in Glenview. So this is a group that's dear to me. And I hope you enjoy the information that we provide to you today. So to get started, so this project that we're going to be talking about, this is the Stormwater Improvement Project that the Village of Winnetka has undertaken. And what started this was, do folks remember the main flooding events we had in early 2011, 2009? We had a lot of flooding that took place and a lot of homes were damaged. There was a lot of property that was damaged. There was, oh, was that better? Sorry, I feel like I should have a side mic. There was a lot of street flooding that took place and a lot of utilities that were taxed. And so the Village of Winnetka Council took this as a serious step to improve the community as a whole. And for those that are not familiar where the floodplain is in the Village of Winnetka, approximately 1/3 of the village on the west side is actually within the floodplain. So we actually have a lot of property that's within the floodplain. So being able to capture, control, and release the stormwater in a better way that preserves the safety of the roadways and protects properties was very critical to the Village of Winnetka. So we started with the undertaking of this project and went through many iterations. My colleague here, Mike Waldron. Mike Waldron is from Strand Associates. He is the main engineer that's in charge of the design of the program that he'll be presenting to you with some detailed information. But the intent is that we wanted to utilize what open space land that we had. We wanted to coordinate with key regulatory and key shareholders of the project, which include New Trier High School, the Winnetka Park District, District 36, the Forest Preserve. I mean, there's a lot of organizations that were involved in the project that's being constructed right now. And for those that don't know, we successfully completed just towards the end of last year, the first phase, which was the North of Willow project. And that was improvements that were done to the Winnetka Golf Course, the New Trier High School fields, and there were some improvements on Hibbard Road. So that was done. That was our first phase. It was a pretty expensive project. A little over $16 million was spent just for that project. There was a lot of underground storage vaults where the stormwater that you can't see goes, and that's underneath what's known as the Duke Childs and Little Duke Childs field. The water is collected, it's harvested. It allows for the sediment to go out. It can be reused on the golf course to help with irrigation. And the soil that was excavated helped to make those improvements on the golf course. In addition, we also created 2 new large ponds that are also used to kind of filter water back and forth between the golf course and the underground storage vault system. And you'll see some exhibits of what that looks like in some of the projects as we kind of went along. So currently right now that project is complete. Looking forward to the golf course opening sometime later this year, I think is what we're hearing from the Park District. And we're still moving forward with the next phase, which is Hibbard Preserve. That's the one that's on the Forest Preserve property. Many have probably familiar with that site. The mass earthwork has been completed, but we're just getting this year into the final restoration. We're starting to put all the landscaping back, the wetlands and things like that. So it's been a very intricate project to date. We still have a lot to go. We are starting on our next phase, which is near the Crow Island School, putting in another large underground vault system. And then we're going to get into the residential neighborhoods where we'll be installing larger conveyance pipes, not small ones, very big, 12 feet by 8 feet tall boxes and larger. And that will help drain the water away towards the homes. And you'll see some of the exhibits that Mike will share with you on it. So I won't take too much time from that, but we're here to answer any questions that you have. This is an important project for us because it can show how government can work together. We can do projects by working together. It takes time. It took us 7 years to get everybody to agree on what we were going to do. It takes time, but it can be done. But once it's done, the benefits that everybody gets as a community and folks visiting really pays off. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mike. And
thank you, Jim. So as Jim noted, my name is Mike Waldron. I'm with Strand Associates Engineers, and I've been there for about 32 years. But more importantly, the last 7 or 8 years of our lives have been wrapped up in this project. I get very excited about this project. I hope you're okay that I go kind of deep into this project and explain it. If not, you can certainly wave your hand, give me this kind of stuff. I'll move on. But I will move around a little bit because I think it helps me and kind of usually helps people to stay awake while I'm giving the presentation. So I'm hoping that this will work. Otherwise, I'll use the mouse. Okay. So jumping right in, Winnetka's West and Southwest Stormwater Management Program provides a 100-year level of protection for a flood-prone community. And I will talk about some of the terms in here, but this is the overall project. Jim gave a good summary of it. I'm going to go into some detail, but from an overall standpoint, we are providing 164 acre-feet of stormwater storage. I will explain what that means as I go forward. That's 32 acre-feet of underground storage, so it's under the ground, and then about 132 acres of surface ponds. We have about 5 miles of stormwater conveyance work, storm sewers. 2.2 miles of that is the large box structures that Jim was talking about, 6 by 4, 6 foot wide by 4 feet deep, all the way up to 12 feet wide by 5 feet tall box storm sewers. We are removing 425 homes out of flooding. And this was all made possible through partnerships we built. As Jim noted, that is really what excites me about this project is the journey that the village took to develop those partnerships with 10 different organizations. So to give you a little bit of background, Winnetka has a long history of recurring flooding. On the left-hand side is an exhibit. That's a model we built that was verified. That shows a storm event that took place in 2011 in the community. When you see red on that map, that shows 2 feet or more depth of flooding during that rainfall event. You can see some of the photos, the representative photos in the beginning, but this is not new for the community. You can go back to the 1930s and find documentation like this newspaper article on the right showing Winnetka as a flood-prone community. And that was the impetus for us going forward on this project. So a little bit of history. Back in September of 2008, you may recall Hurricane Ike hit Galveston, Texas. And you might remember the remnants of that ran right up the Midwest. And in fact, in Winnetka dropped 8.2 inches of rainfall in 36 hours. That exceeds the 100-year event. So I'm going to take a step back and just kind of explain that to you. A lot of people hear the 100-year event. They think, well, that means that it's going to happen once every 100 years. It's a nice way to think about it, but it actually is a statistical item that says this event has a 1% chance of happening in any given year, which is why you can have a 100-year event this year and you can have another one next year. Odds are against it, but it really is just a probability thing that comes into play here. So in response to that, in 2011, the village went ahead and adopted a stormwater management program, about $14 million identified to provide a 10-year level of protection. So a 10-year level of protection would be a storm that happens every 10 years, but it's more a storm that has a 10% chance of happening in any given year. That's that level of protection. Well, sure enough, right after they adopted that plan, they got hit with another storm event in 2011. This was the big one. It dropped 6.5 inches of rainfall in 3.5 hours, well beyond that 100-year event. Over 1,000 homes, about a quarter of the community experienced some level of damage through that storm event. So then the village went back and revised their stormwater management plan, identified $42 million worth of work to provide a 100-year level of protection. But there were some issues with that plan. There were some partners that we needed that just weren't willing to play. So the village went forward and looked at some other options. And in 2013, they started to look at the Willow Road Tunnel project. They did a feasibility study, indicated $35 million for this. So it was attractive, $7 million less than the other plan. It included about 2 miles of 96-inch diameter or 8-foot diameter tunnel. That's a pretty big tunnel that would take the stormwater from the west side of the community towards Lake Michigan. And so they started preliminary engineering in 2013. 2014, they did a 20% check. The engineer came up, said, "Hey, how are we doing?" And they said, "Well, the cost has increased to $59 million. Okay, $59 million. But the thing is, they started to hear that the Illinois Environmental Protection Agency and the Illinois Department of Natural Resources were giving them some problems with regards to water quality and the quality of that stormwater getting passed out into Lake Michigan. So that was kind of ringing in the back of their minds too. So in 2015, the village had an independent consultant and a tunneling contractor reevaluate the project. They came back at $80 million before water quality improvements or any kind of water quality facility was even included in that. So the village said, "Stop, we need to rethink this. This isn't the direction we were intending on going." And so they pivoted. In 2016, we performed the West and Southwest Stormwater Alternative Study, which is where we wanted to revisit the entire watershed holistically. We wanted to look at things like the natural systems, the topography of the area, what are the soils like? We wanted to go deeper into the infrastructure, like roadways, what do the storm sewers actually look like? What are some of the other utilities in the area? We wanted to do some urban auditing. That's where we get a little bit of an idea of the age of the homes in the area, the demographics of the area. And then we wanted to look a little bit deeper, historical planning, comprehensive planning. It's a more holistic view of what is going on in this watershed. The intent was to identify what actually is the source of this problem. Let's not treat the results of the problem. Let's find out what the actual problem is and try to come up with a sustainable stormwater management program for West and Southwest. And so I'm going to walk you through what we actually found. So here's the village of Winnetka. Corporate boundaries are in yellow. Lake Michigan is on the eastern boundary, but there's also these western water features, the Skokie River and the Skokie River Lagoon system. That drains down into the north branch of the Chicago River and eventually into Chicago River. And if you know anything about Chicago hydrology, back in the early 1900s, the Army Corps reversed the flow of the Chicago River. It used to flow into Lake Michigan. It also had a lot of wastewater in it. They turned it around and they sent it in the other direction. They sent it west. It goes to the Illinois River and eventually to the Mississippi River in the Gulf of Mexico. So Winnetka has a subcontinental drainage divide cutting right through it. About 890 acres of the community flows east into Lake Michigan, conceivably to the Atlantic. 1,630 flows west into the Skokie River. That's the watershed we were interested in, the Skokie River watershed. And in particular, this is the west and southwest watershed of Winnetka. That was our study area. So a little bit of data for that area. Impervious surface is important. Impervious surface is rooftops, sidewalks, pavement, roadway, driveways. Well, within this area, about 1,200 acres is developed land. It has a 34% impervious surface. That's very high, actually. It's not a Chicago type of high, but typically residential development is probably normally in around a 24% impervious. So 34 is very high. There's about 370 acres of undeveloped land that's kind of open space, parks and whatnot, having a 16% impervious surface. So the composite of this watershed is still 30%. That means a lot of the rainwater that hits on the ground runs off. In addition, Winnetka has some very bad soils. Class D soils, that's all that purple area. D means it's very tight clay material. That means that water, surface water, doesn't infiltrate through it very easily at all. There's a little bit of B and D soils. That's that gold area. There'd be B, which is really good from an infiltration standpoint, but it comes to D because there's a very high groundwater table, about 18 inches to 2 feet below ground. And when you do get storm events and when the Skokie River level does rise, that groundwater will rise. That makes them more D soil. So what it's telling me is, even if I didn't have all that impervious surface, it's really hard for me to get stormwater into the ground, which affects green infrastructure, which is everybody's flag that they wave when they say we want to deal with stormwater. It's valuable, but here it doesn't work very well. As I noted before, about 370 acres of parks, recreation, and preserves that are shown in the orange on here. And then the village has about 150 acres of right-of-way. And that's valuable because there's parkway. We could do linear green infrastructure, bioswales, that kind of stuff within that right-of-way. But again, our soils aren't really good, but it was still something we wanted to take a look at and figure out, is there an opportunity there? But as Jim noted earlier, one of the biggest things we recognized is the FEMA floodplain. That's shown here in blue, and you can see most of the area is in a 100-year floodplain. That means that it was subject to impacts from the Skokie River during high water levels to overflow and flood this area. So if I delineate the edge of that in this pink line and I overlay it on top of our flooding, gosh, it looks like we have a floodplain issue here. That's the first thing that might jump out at you. But we dug deeper and found this isn't actually the case. So this goes back to late 1920s. This is a photograph showing the location, very marshy. Clearly what you'd expect from a floodplain area, water levels ranging from a couple inches to a couple feet seasonally. So definitely this area was very marshy. But in the 1930s, the Civilian Conservation Corps came in, and that's when they built the Skokie Lagoons. And you can see some photos here of the early lagoons in the mapping system on the right-hand side here. So that certainly started to change things in the area, and that's what was curious to us. This is 1938. That same pink line that designates the floodplain, but for some reason, development is starting to creep into this floodplain area. This area that you saw earlier was very marshy and very wet. Why was development starting to move into that marshy, wet area? Well, what we found out is when they built the Skokie Lagoons, they also built a levee. So there's a levee that's protecting the village of Winnetka from the Skokie River. And here's a photo of the construction of that levee system. So and everything we've been able to find with regards to this levee system is our understanding it has never overtopped, except in 2011, that big storm event, and it overtopped at the golf course and very minor overtopping at the golf course. So this levee system is actually protecting the community, and that floodplain is a bit of a phantom. It doesn't really exist because the community is protected by a levee. So it really isn't a floodplain issue. But what it does do is it creates a bathtub effect. So this upper picture is what the historical would be. That's the Skokie River. When the Skokie River level rises, it was able to overflow its banks and fill in that floodplain. The lower exhibit shows what it is now. The levee system contains the river within those banks, doesn't let it overflow, so it does protect the community, but the community is now trapped behind that levee. You can picture it as a bathtub with a very, very small drain. And that drain is a pumping station. That's what the village is dependent upon, is pumping over the levee system to take that entire watershed drainage through a pumping station. I will tell you, it's a very big pumping station. It's regulated with the IDNR, so we can only pump so much water into the river. If I wanted to address this issue with pumping, I'd have to put in 200 more pumps. These pumps are huge. That was not an option for us. This is a picture of that pumping station. That upper picture is looking west towards the levee. You can see the kind of levee in the background. The pumps are on the left-hand side. The lower picture is 180. It's looking upstream at a man-made ditch that cuts diagonally across that property. This is a 1938 USDA photo that shows back then, entire watershed, and still today, the entire watershed drains to this location through this man-made ditch to that pumping station, that little bathtub, and that's where the problems start for the village of Winnetka. Now, why do I spend so much time talking about that, and why is that so important? It is that understanding, the historical characteristics that allowed us to build the relationships that we were able to build and to get the partnerships on board for this project. That understanding is critical to those stakeholder partnerships. And I'm going to talk, there's 10 different entities on here that we've had to negotiate and come up with agreements. I'm not going to cover them all, but I'm going to cover many of them. But first, a little bit, when we went through the study, we did a public outreach. Did a lot of what I just did here, trying to explain and help people understand what the problem is, and verified that the more important was hearing back from the people who worked in the community to say, is that really what happens when it floods? And to confirm that I'm not just making this up. That's what happens when it floods. So that was very important for us. So then the next step was to try to figure out, okay, well, how big is this problem? And we did some modeling work that told us I needed to have 150 acre feet of storage. That's 150 acre feet of stormwater I need to collect in some way and get out of those neighborhoods. How much is that? This was one of the hardest things we had to do when we were going through the public engagement, was to try to understand, okay, how much is an acre foot? So 1 acre is about 209 feet by 209 feet. So an acre foot, 1 acre foot is 1 foot of water over that entire area. Okay. 325,000 gallons. Okay. You kind of start to get the idea, but I think what really drove it home is we flooded Soldier Field with that volume of water. That would be filling Soldier Field 35 feet deep with water. Pretty much takes up the entire section 100 of the stadium. Then people started to realize, oh, that's a lot of water. That's a lot of water to have to deal with. So then we started to talk about strategies. How do we go about addressing 150 acre feet? And people love green infrastructure, and it definitely has its place, but generally it has its place down here in these smaller storm events, a 1 year, 2 year level of storm event. We're talking 100 year and then July 11th on this end. That means we're looking at a completely different animal. We're looking at storage and conveyance. How do I get the water out of the neighborhoods and take it to a place that I can store it? It started to open up the understanding that this isn't going to be something that I can deal with in the neighborhoods. This is a much bigger issue to have to deal with. So then we started to look at opportunities. As Jim noted, we have open space, and I noted we have open space, 370 acres of it. There's a great opportunity there. Unfortunately, we don't own any of it. It's owned by other entities. So here's where the relationships come in. One of the most important ones we made was with the Forest Preserve District of Cook County. They own that property. Remember that property? This is the one with the pumping station where all the stormwater comes to today and fills up on that property. That was an important relationship. We also had to deal with the Army Corps, U.S. Fish and Wildlife, and Illinois DNR for that property. And I want to talk a little bit about how we did that with them. So some background on forest preserves. Back in 1913, Illinois legislature adopted the Forest Preserve Act, and the whole point was to develop another district that would protect lands, protect open spaces. And so 1916 was the very first one, happened to be Cook counties. And over the years, they have gathered 69,000 acres of protected forest, wetlands, marsh areas. They cannot sell that property. They cannot trade that property. They cannot build on that property unless it has a recreational value to it. And in their charter, it specifically says, under no circumstances shall Forest Preserve District property be used for stormwater storage. That was the uphill point. And when we sat down with them and talked with them, they said, hey, you do know this, right? And we said, we do know that. And they said, well, you better have very compelling evidence if you're going to ask for that. And if you have very compelling evidence, we're going to make you hurt if you want to do this. That was a quote. I'm not making that up. That was a quote. We're going to make you hurt. Well, we had compelling evidence. The evidence I just showed you from back in the 30s, that's where all the stormwater came. And even over the 70s and into 2002, yes, you developed a forest preserve there, but it has always been stormwater storage. So it was that background and that understanding that got us to the table with the forest preserve and allowed us to come up with this original vision for the Hibbard Preserve Stormwater Management Facility. I love this vision. Everybody loved this vision. It's a good vision. When engineering started, things started to change a little bit. So this isn't exactly the plan that we have constructing right now, but I'll tell you a little bit about it. Forest Preserve was a little concerned that they didn't have the resources to take care of all the trails and the bridges and the overlooks. And so they said, that stuff should probably go away because we can't take care of it. But that's why I found out what it meant to be dealing with a forest preserve and what the term "it's going to hurt" came from. This figure shows every tree on that property. Those little circles represent trees. The various sizes and colors represent the size of the tree and the value of the tree. So the red circles in particular, those trees would have cost me $60,000 or more per tree to take them down. In fact, there's a 72-inch cottonwood they tell us is the largest in Cook County, which would have cost $250,000 to take down. So we had to go back to the drawing board. This was going to cost, our original plan was going to cost us $13 million just to take down trees. So obviously we went back to the drawing board. We also had the Army Corps because a lot of the site has wetlands on it, including this meadow, this sedge meadow down here in the corner, this blue area with a 12-to-1 mitigation ratio. What that means is that the Army Corps tells you if you disturb an acre of wetland, you must replace 12 acres of wetland. It's hard to do, hard to find a place to do that, very expensive to do that. And so those mitigation ratios started to cause us some problems. So needless to say, we spent several years going between Forest Preserve, who wanted you to protect the trees, and the Army Corps, who wanted you to protect the wetlands. Go ahead and put it in the trees. Well, no, I can't put it in the trees. Back and forth, we did about 9 different iterations and finally came up with this site. We reduced our tree removal, 1,700 trees down to about 280. We reduced the wetland disturbance and we avoided the highest quality wetlands and endangered species. There are some endangered species on this site that we were able to avoid also to come up with this final site layout and got approval. Took us a while, 2016 to 2022, we negotiated with the Forest Preserve District, but we finally signed an agreement with them. The license agreement fees, we paid about $3.1 million to be able to put it on this site. Those were tree removal costs, like 1.2 in tree removal, but there was also just the use of the land. It was like leasing, almost like leasing property from them, and we had to take 14 acres. And so we paid for it in the project. The village has perpetual ownership over the footprint, so they have to take care of that stormwater area, which means we have an environmental company that will come in and make sure that everything's growing okay, help with weed removal. We must demonstrate that we have improved water quality from before construction to after construction. But the biggest thing that we were required to do is to capture what's called the first flush runoff before it gets to the forest preserve. First flush is a term that's used to pick up the pollutants when the rainfall comes. It's the first ½ inch of rainfall on all impervious surface in the watershed. You remember, we have a very high impervious surface. The whole concept there is if you don't have rain for a while, the ground gathers a lot of dirt, oils, greases, heavy metals from your cars. When the rain comes, that rainfall flushes that off, that first concentrated pollutant loading. They don't want it on the forest preserve. I don't want it on the forest preserve. So we're required to capture it and treat it. So this is the summary of the project that Jim noted. We're in construction right now. We're providing 74 acre-feet of stormwater storage, almost half of the stormwater storage we needed. So this was a key project site for us. We have reduced flood inundation on the site from 48 hours down to 26 hours. That's very important because wetlands, they like wet, but they don't like being inundated for a long period of time. 48 hours starts to kill your wetland area. 24 to 26 hours is a good range to be able to protect the wetlands on the site. How did we do this? We lowered the entire site within that footprint 4 to 5 feet. That's where we moved a lot of earth. Only 5,300 cubic yards of topsoil was stripped and stockpiled. 105,000 cubic yards of clay. To give you an idea, one of those big dump trucks that you might see carrying soil materials on the roadway, they'll carry between 10 and 15 cubic yards. So that's about 9,000 trucks of soil that came out of the site to be able to create this. And then we respread all the wetland topsoil, really good topsoil, respread it all on there. We created some open water forebase here. That's where the stormwater enters the site, and that's a place where the village can go in and kind of dredge out sediment material and continue to take care of the site. And one of the most important aspects of the entire project, the entire program, is that we maintained the pumping rates to the Skokie River. So any of the communities downstream on the Skokie River are not seeing any more stormwater than they did before we started this project. And that was huge to not exacerbate stormwater problems for other people downstream. And then I had mentioned we had other agencies, the Illinois Department of Natural Resources, they're the ones that manage the Skokie River. They loved the project from day one, like the only agency who loved the project from day one, unfortunately. U.S. Fish and Wildlife had a couple of things that they, that the long-eared bat, it was turned endangered at the beginning of 2023. So we had to deal with that. That just means we can't disturb its nesting habitat. So we had to avoid those areas. The prairie fringed orchid was supposed to be in one of the sedge meadow areas that we moved ourselves away from. We never actually found that orchid. But the U.S. Fish and Wildlife said, no, it's out there. We know it's out there. We're sure it's out there. You need to stay away from it. Okay, stay away. And as I noted earlier, we still disturbed 10.43 acres of wetland. The Army Corps still hit us with a 4.8 to 1 mitigation ratio. I had to put back 4.8 acres for every acre I disturbed. About 50 acres, over 50 acres, I was required to restore. Now, you can't just find that. It's very difficult. But again, a partnership, strong partnership with the Forest Preserve, they have a property in Rolling Meadows. And that's where we worked with the Forest Preserve District to mitigate those 50 acres of wetlands and get our Army Corps permit. So that was big for us. So as Jim noted, we started this project in December of 22, started to take down some trees, spent most of 2023 grading the site, doing a lot of the earthwork. Towards the end of 2023, we were able to start to put down seed and to reblanket the site, and that's generally what most of the site looks like today. Looking forward to the springtime to start to see that, to start to green up and start to reestablish the site and the wetlands to start to reestablish on this property. So in addition to the Forest Preserve, we also had to build relationships with the Park District and with the New Trier High School District that owned the Duke Childs Fields along Hibbard Road, north of Willow Road, as shown in the coloring there. This was the original vision for Duke Childs and Little Duke. We wanted to be above ground. Both entities wanted to keep the athletic fields. And so again, we spent about 4 years in negotiation in 2021, finalized the agreement with them to put all that stormwater storage underground. And so this is generally the original or the layouts. One of the important things is that both of those entities plan to do some more building on their property, which then brings in regulatory requirements for them. They have to detain stormwater runoff. They have to compensate for loss of floodplain. We're giving them all of that within those underground storage facilities. So that was a win-win for both organizations. But even more importantly, with this facility, we were able to meet that Forest Preserve District's first flush runoff capture and treat requirement. And I'll show you how we did that. Underground storage, shown here from on a plan view, is in orange. There's that purple line, that's the storm sewer that drains the underground storage downstream to the Hibbard Preserve, Forest Preserve. Looking at that from the side, we lowered the underground storage facility 5 feet. So the bottom 5 feet of this facility holds back all that water, all that dew. It has to get to 5 feet before it overflows and goes into the Forest Preserve. So we've captured that first flush in the facility. We have a water quality structure. All that water goes through a water quality structure, and then it's either pumped downstream to Hibbard Preserve, or it's pumped upstream to the golf courses. And I'll explain those projects in a moment. So that was a huge win for us to meet that requirement for the Forest Preserve. This is the final project, 21 acre-feet of stormwater. It eliminates flooding of the athletic fields. If you have been in Winnetka for a while, you'll know it doesn't have to rain much and those fields get flooded and they can't do their activities on them. We are keeping them dry. 38,600 cubic yards of clay was removed, and we met the water quality improvements through this project. We started this in August of 2022. That's the underground storage facility being constructed. We spent most of 2022 to the end of 2022 completing those underground storage facilities. They're kind of cool to walk through. And so that was completed that underground work was completed at the end of 2022. We also had a second agreement with the Park District to utilize the par 3 in the 18-hole golf courses. You could say this was the original vision. You can see the golf course in the red circle, but there's no coloring there because the park district originally said, you're not touching the golf course. But again, we went back to the historical records about flooding, specifically that your golf course floods all the time. And in fact, every year they lose a couple of weeks of being able to play because the golf course is too wet. In 2011, when we had that storm event, it took them a month to reopen the golf course. So that's a big problem for them. On top of it, in the dry summers, they depend more on public water to irrigate the golf course, which also costs them a lot of money. Well, I've got a way I can help you with that. So in 2021, we finalized this agreement where we were providing supplemental irrigation water, we're reducing their dependency on the village's water system, and we're providing significant course-wide improvements. As was noted before, we raised the entire 18-hole golf course, in some places 2 to 3 feet. Elevated that. That also had us reconstruct a good amount of their drainage system and their irrigation system to improve the golf course. So this is the final project. We have 58 acre-feet of stormwater storage. We raised all the tees and greens and 80% of the fairways out of the 100-year flood event. We reduced inundation on the course from 4 days to 16 hours. We're providing them with an additional 10 days of supplemental irrigation water, hoping that can get them through any of the hot summer days that their own irrigation water plus an additional 10 that they wouldn't have to be on public water. We removed 115,000 cubic yards of clay. We respread 32,000 of that on the golf course, so that was good. 61,500 cubic yards of topsoil was stripped and respread. So this was the par 3 golf course. Started work in August of 2022. Grading that out, and we were able to get through a lot of it. That's some of the storm conveyance that connects the golf course to the underground storage facility. We were able to get green up this year. This is a picture in 2023, and we're continuing to work with the park district to continue to improve the course, fill in spaces where the grass isn't coming in well, doing weed removal, that kind of thing. So it's nice to be able to see some green up on the par 3 course. The 18-hole course we started in November of 2022, worked throughout the winter, grading over the site, and spent most of 2023 developing and redeveloping the rest of the golf course. Towards the end of the year, we started to put back the features. We reconstructed almost all the bunkers on the golf course. And we seeded the golf course, started seeding the golf course in September of 2023. And within 2 to 3 weeks, we were greening back up on the fairways that we were completed. We got them all done by the end of September and early October. And the pond that we constructed on here, 32 acre feet of storage, took us about 4 months to fill it because we didn't have the wettest summer or fall, but it's full now. And then as Jim noted, the golf course will stay closed for a good part of 2024 as we continue to do improvements, making sure the grass is coming in, making sure that it's solid before people start walking on it and start taking divots out of it. So excited to continue to watch it grow back. And then one of the last local partnerships was, again, a third agreement with the park district and a new agreement with the school district, District 36. This is the Crow Island site. This was the original vision. I loved this vision. It was another open water, stormwater, wetland type of area. Had a lot of ability to do some trail systems and whatnot, but we got a lot of pushback. The neighbors were concerned about the trees and the proximity to the school. And so again, we worked through an agreement with them and brought that facility underground. In this case, again, in 2021, again, we're meeting, the school is doing an expansion. So we're meeting their regulatory requirements with this site. Again, like we did with Duke Childs, we lowered this 5 feet lower so we could capture and treat the first flush. And we are providing 10.8 acre feet and 20,000 cubic yards of clay was removed for this. And Jim noted and then after that, we'll continue working on conveyance. There will be a lot of conveyance. The storage is wonderful, but if I can't get the flooding out of the neighborhoods and into the storage, it doesn't quite work yet. So over the next several years, probably 5 or 6 years, we'll be doing conveyance work in the community. Some of that has started. You can see inside of some of the culvert work that will be going on the project. Requires a lot of utility relocation along with that. So we're getting a lot of new water main and sewer systems. It's large conveyance work. And then the final relationship, Winnetka Landfill and the Illinois Environmental Protection Agency. Many of you are aware that Winnetka has a landfill. It was closed in it stopped operation in 1993, but nobody was aware that it wasn't actually officially closed. And so Jim spent all of 2018 through 2022 working with the IEPA to close the landfill. Otherwise, we couldn't use it for anything. You couldn't put anything on it. You couldn't do anything with it. And that was quite a hurdle to get that closed. And we actually got our final closure notice 1 week before our contractor was mobilizing to start work on the Duke Childs project. So just in enough time, 250,000 cubic yards were thousands and thousands of trucks. We believe being able to use the landfill for taking that clay material and disposing of it saved us about $5.5 million in hauling of soils on this project. So the landfill was a key component. And from the very beginning, we started to use it. We have filled it in. We've kind of filled in some low spots and some terracing that used to be there. We've only raised the top about 3 or 4 feet to this point, but it's given us a chance to reestablish it. And we've already seen some green up on the landfill, but that was a huge benefit for us to be able to use the landfill for disposal purposes. So I shared with you in the beginning, our vision was to fix that. The flooding that happens in the community all the time. That's what our modeling says is going to be the result of being able to implement all of this storage and this conveyance. Certainly there's still some green in there. That's low. That's probably about 6 inches worth of water. Our intent was to be able to get everything off of private property, some flooding in some streets, but being able to get emergency vehicles through at all times. That's the result. But I think one of the more important results is the number of properties that are protected. This community has 56 homes that are impacted for a 2-year storm event. They get flooding all the time. And we're able to get that down to 2. In the 100-year event, 474 homes are impacted by the 100-year flood event. We've got that down to 49. The other 49, we could have made this thing 10 times bigger. We wouldn't have been able to help them. So we then also have a program that will individually look at trying to figure out how to handle those additional homes that are susceptible. But that is a huge reduction in flooding in the community for this project. We did a benefit cost analysis. Everybody would be very interested in the costs of this. Back in 2016, we did this evaluation. I won't do the detail of it, but generally, annualized cost is almost $20,000 per home per year in damages. When we applied that to the expected cost of the project in over a 50-year lifetime, these things are going to be here for 100 years or more, but only a 50-year lifetime, we have a 1.72 benefit cost ratio. That means that the benefit I'm getting is 1.72 times greater than the cost I'm investing to make this improvement. Typically, if you have a 1.1, you're going, okay, I'm going to go forward with this. 1.72 made this an easy decision for us to undertake this huge project. That number also doesn't include things like your car that got stuck in the underpass, the landscaping that was destroyed on your property, the utility impacts in the community that are being lessened because of the stormwater project, and the ancillary improvements. Property values is the biggest one, but also the knowledge that Winnetka is no longer a flood-prone community is huge to the community and made this an easy decision for the village to undertake. So that's Winnetka's project. I think I want to roll along. I hope you're okay with that. And if there are questions. Okay.
Put it in perspective, I actually used to have a lot of hair when we started this program, and so it's kind of like Soldiers Field. It was bigger at one point. The golf course, though, for those that are interested, we had a video where we actually had a drone kind of fly through the golf course so you could kind of see what it looked like. We weren't sure if we would be able to get access to it here, but the video is actually on the Winnetka Park District's website. So if you get a chance, just take a look at it. You'll see the renovations. The golf course, it looks beautiful for those who enjoy the golf course or the walking trails. You can walk on it in the evening time. there's been a lot of interest in it. I know it's been put up for an award through the Chicago Golf Association for one of the best improvements in 2024 or 2023. Sorry, they just finished. So there's a lot of interest in it. The aesthetic changes are really just something. Rick Jacobson was the golf course designer, and he did just a tremendous job doing it. So if you have a chance, take a look at that as well. So
we're going to take questions. We have one here. And if you could pass the mic to your neighbor on the right.
Thank you very much for that presentation. As an engineer myself, I can appreciate just a slight amount of what you went through. Not a civil engineer. My friends will attest to me not being civil, but in any engineering project, you have the goal that you're trying to reach, and then you have all of the constraints that you have to deal with. In my career, the constraints usually were things like the laws of physics. Nothing like the constraints that you had to deal with and work through. And I am tremendously impressed with you even being able to do this project. So thank you for that. My question is, I don't live in Winnetka, I live in Wilmette, and Wilmette has had a very similar project going on for a number of years, probably with a lot of the same constraints that you've had. And I'm wondering what association you might have had between Winnetka and Wilmette to accomplish this.
sure, no, their projects are slightly different than ours, where ours was a lot of above ground renovation and holding, where we had a piece of, as Mike indicated, the Cook County Forest Preserve property, where Wilmette's project did not. Wilmette's is more utilizing some of their park area and putting underground storage systems in. But we did communicate with them as their project was going on to kind of share what are some of the pros and cons that you saw as part of your project. The storm trap systems, which are those big concrete structures that you saw, they're called storm traps. So we did communicate with them to kind of share ideas as engineers going back and forth about what we thought, or was there ways to improve it.
Many of the homes on the west part of Winnetka require flood insurance or have required it. How long before that issue is addressed with your proposed?
Yeah, so as the village's stormwater manager, I can answer that. It's not going to go away. What we do is we participate in the National Flood Insurance Program, or it's called the CRS program. It's a community rating system program where the village can take steps to improve and demonstrate that we're taking steps to improve flooding. This project itself is actually going to improve our rating. And so every time we're currently rated as a 6, 10 is the highest you can go. And when you get to 1, you have no flooding. So we're a 6, which means every drop in point is a 5% reduction in flood insurance premiums. This project alone and the contributions we've done, we're anticipating to get down to at least a 4. So that unto itself would be at about a 25 to 30% reduction in flood insurance premiums. So we are working with the insurance companies as it relates to that. In order to take those properties officially out, the levy that Mike had indicated in there has to be certified. There are no drawings to certify how that levy was completely constructed, and to take that on would be a big financial liability for the village. And there's a lot of upkeep and recording that has to be done with that. And so for that reason, the village is not at this time looking to take and certify that levy. So hopefully that addresses that.
Hello, I believe that you said the landfill was eliminated on Willow Road. So what is Winnetka doing with its garbage now?
There you go. So we reverted to a traditional one where the haulers collect it and take it away. The village of Winnetka used to have that landfill where we used to bring it to that landfill area, and then they would cap it. And then it wound up reaching capacity. And so for that reason, they closed it and they no longer accepted it, but nobody went through the paperwork to close it. It took a while to go through that. But we use regular traditional services where we collect it, take it, and it goes to Swank right now. easier just to talk over. It'll just be easier to talk here. We need to stay away from each other.
That one's on.
Can you talk a little bit about the funding sources for the project?
Podium, maybe it's a little bit easier that way. So the funding sources for this, the village initiated a stormwater utility fee. And what that is they treat the stormwater like every other utility where you would pay for your water or for sanitary. That involves maintenance of the infrastructure. Those costs are brought into what you pay either per gallon or your waste collected. So a lot of communities in the past used to just have it where the village would just pay for stormwater. Because the upkeep for those systems have started to reach their useful lives, communities started creating a stormwater utility fee, and basically you're charged. Each parcel is evaluated on a case-by-case basis on the amount of impervious area that you have. So the more impervious area that you have, the more you contribute to the storm sewer system. And so they come up with a value. It's called an ERU. And that shows up for Winnetka residents, it shows up on your utility bill based on your parcel size and the percentage of impervious area that you have, you pay a fee towards that. Those fees are collected and then they're used solely just for the maintenance of the stormwater system. Now, in addition to that, the village has aggressively gone after grants to help pay for this. We were very fortunate to get, to date, we had a $28 million grant. So there's 28 millions that we had so far, and we've applied for another 35 million. And we've gotten another 5 on top of that. So literally more than almost half of this project is primarily paid for utilizing grant funds. The federal grants. Yep.
Yeah, I have a question. Is the Skokie Lagoon work that's being done, I think you see it if you go down Winnetka Road, past the end of it, is it doing construction work in there? Is that where they're pulling they're deepening that lagoon?
I'm not familiar of any work taking place in the Skokie Lagoons. If you're talking about Winnetka Road and just west of Hibbard, that's our site. That's the Hibbard Preserve site. That's the excavation that took place there.
Okay.
That was us.
Question back here.
I drove through the Hibbard Willow intersection every day all summer to get out here to the workout center 6 days a week. So I know what you were doing there all the time. And now they were hauling all the soil up to the top of the hill on the south. Is it still up there, or are they using that to fill in someplace? And is the pond that now shows up on the southwest corner going to stay an open pond?
Yeah, so the soil that was brought in when we were excavating out the Hibbard Preserve site, they kept that on the Cook County Forest Preserve and came up the side of the landfill to place the soil. That work has been completed. When we continue to bring soil in the future, we'll come through Willow Road and then kind of up the side. Now, the open area where it appears to be the open pond area, we have some final grading and then the restoration in there, but it'll look primarily like it does now. The deer,
Were the deer affected was the question.
yeah. So Bucky, who's a good friend of mine, is the big buck that likes to poke his head through my office window at nighttime. He stayed to the Forest Preserve area to the west of where the Public Works facility is at. But now that the landfill has started greening, they're all coming back out and they go to the top of the landfill and along the sides. They continue that path that they've created, and they're very happy with the golf course too. We have to keep them out of there, by the way.
Has this been the most challenging engineering project in hydrology in the nation, would you say?
Yes.
Yes, we would.
Yes. We'll find in my career. Yes, it has. It is definitely the most challenging. I'm sorry, I'm standing on the soapbox a little bit here, but what made it most challenging were a lot of the agencies. It was very difficult. going through the various agencies and getting approvals. It looks like a wonderful project, comes with an incredible reason for doing it, but it was a little surprising at how many people said, no, I don't think that's a good idea. I don't think you should do that. I don't think, and how we had to work them through this process to understand the benefit.
In the interest of time and pizza, and then your meeting that's coming up, we're going to just take two questions. I have one. Here's the next to last question.
Okay, I've got a couple of questions that, one,
He took your question, by the way.
the houses on the west side of Winnetka, why did they have flooding? Was it in the wrong side of the levee, or why?
You mean in the, I'm sorry, you mean in the Northfield side?
No, on the Winnetka side of the road. Where you show the pictures of why was there
By the
flooding there?
Yeah, it was mainly because all of the runoff got stopped by the levee and couldn't get in the
Okay.
river. And
Got
that
it.
pumping station is like 2% of the capacity that we need. So it just filled up the area like a bathtub.
Okay, and on Winnetka Road on the south side, there appears to be a structure. Is that more pumps?
So it's the home, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's actually a residential home that's being built there on that site, and it's up on piers to get it up.
Last question. Is Winnetka unique in its need for this? Are the other villages involved in thinking about it? And also, when you do what you do, does it impact those in ways that are negative? In other words, does your action create problems for any neighbor of villages? And do they need to look at this? Or am I asking the wrong person? That
No.
should I already give the answer?
No, very good question. One of the things I didn't mention in the presentation is Winnetka, like a lot of the communities in Northeast Illinois, in the Cook County specifically, the age of the homes, over 50% of the community was built before 1980. And in this case, in Winnetka, I think it's like 75% of the homes were built before 1980. In the 80s is when people started to go, hey, we need to take care of stormwater. We need to put pipes that are bigger. We need to put in local detention facilities. You'll go through Wilmette, Winnetka, a lot of these communities that were built before the 80s, and you won't find those local detention facilities. And so there are a lot of communities. This is one of the biggest issues for communities right now, is chasing stormwater. But as I noted, one of the key things that we look at when we start to do this project is that we're not impacting the guy next to us. And that was a big part of, we left the pumping station alone. That is the only thing that drains the area to the Skokie River, same as it always has, so as to not impact Northfield and the other communities downstream. So that is a key parameter that we look for.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Jim and Mike. Let's hear it. I think they certainly have earned their pizza, didn't they?